Picture this. I step off the plane after 6 months overseas, expecting to see nothing but open desert and wildflowers. Instead, I'm staring at 120 identical homes standing on my land, my inheritance. The HOA calls it progress. I call it fraud built on stolen soil. What they didn't know. I'd spent 15 years designing legal traps for people exactly like them. My name is Brian Jordan, a 45-year-old forensic accountant who spent most of his life exposing financial fraud. When my aunt passed away, she left me 50 acres of untouched land in Arizona, a quiet place where I plan to retire someday. That morning, the Arizona sun felt extra welcoming as my Uber slowed near what used to be my property. The driver frowned at his GPS. "Sir, are you sure this is right? Looks like a whole new neighborhood." My heart sank. Where my aunt's oak trees once stood, there were paved streets and beige houses lined like cloned soldiers. Fresh lawns. Mailboxes labeled Emerald Heights HOA. A gold-lettered sign read, "Phase 2 opening soon." I stepped out, speechless. My land, my inheritance, had become someone's development project. I walked to the sales office, a polished glass building that looked more like a corporate fortress than a community center. Inside, a realtor greeted me with a forced smile. "Interested in buying one of our homes?" I slid my property deed across her desk. "No," I said evenly. "I'm interested in knowing why you built them on my land." Moments later, I was escorted upstairs to meet Melanie Ross, the HOA president. Her office gleamed with marble floors, expensive art, and a wall of legal degrees. She smiled the kind of smile only lawyers and liars perfect. "Mr. Jordan," she purred, "so glad you could join us. I assure you everything here is perfectly legal. Your aunt signed an HOA agreement back in 1998. I frowned. That agreement was for a half-acre easement, not 50 acres of construction. Melanie slid a folder across the desk. Inside were letters, certified notices, and court filings, each sent to my aunt's old address, the one demolished years ago. "You see," she said sweetly, "we followed procedure." When no one objected, the HOA proceeded. I stared at her, feeling anger coil in my chest. "You knowingly sent notices to an address that doesn't exist." She leaned back, unbothered. "Not our job to track heirs. You should have kept your contact info updated." That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a strategy. Melanie had built her empire by burying people in paperwork, and now she'd built an entire neighborhood on my land. She just didn't know yet. She built it on top of a ticking legal bomb. That night in my hotel room, I did what I do best, follow the money. Public records, land transfers, shell companies. Within hours, the pattern screamed at me. Emerald Heights wasn't the first. Melanie had done this 15 times before, taking over land owned by the elderly or the deceased. I leaned back, stunned. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "If you want the truth about Emerald Heights, meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. Java Junction Cafe." A friend. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I traced payments from the HOA's account to an offshore company in the Cayman Islands under Melanie's maiden name. Fraud. Concealment. Money laundering. But I needed a witness. Someone inside her operation. When I walked into Java Junction the next morning, the scent of burnt coffee and cheap hope filled the air. A young woman in a navy suit approached me nervously. "Mr. Jordan," she whispered. "My name's Allison West. I used to work for Melanie." I nodded slowly. "Then you already know how deep this goes." She opened a folder, her hands trembling. "Mr. Jordan, you have no idea." Allison's story spilled out in fragments. Emails, fake contracts, and recorded calls. "The HOA isn't just a neighborhood," she said. "It's a property acquisition scheme. Melanie targets vulnerable estates, sends notices to invalid addresses, and takes over through silence." She slid me an email chain. My breath caught. Melanie had written, "The old woman's dead. Send the notices anyway. We'll fish in a dry pond." My aunt. Allison wiped her eyes. I tried to expose her, but she's connected judges, lawyers, even city councilors in her pocket. I studied the documents. Offshore accounts. Forged signatures. Even falsified environmental reports. "She built homes on contaminated land," Allison whispered. "Every permit is illegal." I looked up, feeling the old fire in my chest. Then she built this entire development on a house of cards. She nodded. And you might be the only one who can topple it. We spent the next 2 hours mapping out our plan. I pretend to fold, to be the greedy heir who'd settle for cash. Allison would play the inside informant. Melanie thought she'd buried my aunt's legacy. She was about to find out that she'd actually planted evidence. The HOA called an emergency meeting to resolve ownership concerns. The hall was packed with homeowners glaring at me like I was the villain. Melanie stood at the podium, perfectly composed. We sympathized with Mr. Jordan's confusion, but everything was done legally. We're offering him generous compensation. I stood up, pretending to hesitate. 200,000. For 50 acres. The crowd murmured. Melanie's smile faltered. Then I pulled out my phone. Before I decide, maybe everyone should hear this. I hit play. Melanie's own voice echoed through the hall. Of course, I knew the old bat was dead. That's why we sent the notices there. By the time her nephew figures it out, we'll have everything locked down tight. The room erupted. Homeowners shouted, demanded answers. Melanie turned white. That's taken out of context, she yelled. I smiled. Context like your hidden environmental reports. Or your offshore accounts. Security moved in, but it was too late. The crowd had turned on her. She stormed out, swearing she'd handle this legally. Good, I thought. That's exactly where I wanted her. Inside my legal trap. Days later, Melanie filed an emergency injunction to silence me, claiming harassment and defamation. But her arrogance became my weapon. Her lawyer accidentally attached bank statements proving she transferred HOA funds into personal accounts. I smiled as I handed them to the judge. Your Honor, I said, the defendant's own evidence proves fraud. The judge raised an eyebrow. I see. Please continue. I opened my binder. Arizona law is very clear. Under Whitmore v. Henderson, 1896, any structure built on private land without permission becomes the property of the landowner. And in this case, I paused. That's me. The courtroom buzzed. Melanie's face twisted in disbelief. You can't claim those homes, she shouted. Oh, I can. You built them on stolen land, using falsified permits. Every brick, every beam, every nail belongs to me. Her lawyer stammered. The judge nodded slowly. Mr. Jordan, you may have a case. Melanie slammed her hand on the table. This isn't over. I smiled. Oh, I agree. It's just beginning. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I said only one thing. She built homes on fraud, and the law says fraud doesn't own property. By nightfall, the HOA was in chaos, investors were fleeing, and Melanie's empire was crumbling. She thought she'd buried me in paperwork. She didn't realize she'd signed over every home she built. 2 nights later, Melanie called me. Let's make a deal, she hissed. $8 million. You sign an NDA and disappear. I agreed to meet her that night at an abandoned warehouse. Hidden under my shirt was an FBI wire. Melanie arrived with 2 bodyguards and a duffel bag full of cash. Count it, she said coldly. I opened the bag, glancing at her. Looks right. Shame it's all marked. She blinked. Marked. Every bill. Withdrawn from your HOA's offshore account. The warehouse doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in. Melanie screamed as they cuffed her. You set me up. I stepped forward. No, Melanie. You set yourself up the day you built those homes on land that wasn't yours. As they led her away, she whispered, You don't know who you're dealing with. I smiled. I know exactly who you are. And now, so does the law. Within weeks, headlines read, OA Empire collapses. President charged in massive land fraud. Melanie faced 25 years in prison. Her company dissolved. Homeowners regained their titles, clean and legal. I used settlement funds to restore the land, planting a garden where her glass office once stood. As I looked across the fields my aunt once loved, I finally smiled. Sometimes justice isn't about revenge. It's about patience. Because when you know the law, you don't fight corruption with rage. You let it walk right into your trap.